The Grand Chess Tour has rolled into town, and some of the strongest players in the world have gathered in Leuven in Belgium to fight in a rapid play and blitz formats. And well, there's been some really interesting stuff so far. We've had 2 days. They've played rapid chess, and at the moment there is a clear leader. Wesley So has really struck out, playing some excellent chess, and I want to look at some of his games here. So this is his first round game against Fabiano Caruana. So they went from Norway chess, where they had that really dramatic last round encounter where Wesley blew it right at the end, and yeah, they played in round 1. And I thought Fabiano had a good opening, but it's definitely turned against him here. Wesley with black has double rooks on the b file, so they dominate and can cut in at any moment. But on the king side, it looks as though white has some kind of light square control here. However, Wesley redressed things by playing queen d7. This is the start of an excellent strategy on the king side. He wants to play f5, of course, using his nice kingside pawn majority. But it seems somehow unlikely that you can get that going. After bishop d3, for example, this is what happened. g6, but actually everything falls into place for black, because the move that white would like to play, h5, to undermine black's control, unfortunately for white, can be met by f5. And of course, if the pawn on g6 is taken, then e4 is a problem. So after g6, Fabiano played g4 to prevent f5, but that weakens the pawn here, which Wesley latched onto immediately with queen e7 attacking. And if the queen shuffles across, then e4 and black's initiative starts rolling. So Fabiano played h5. He's still trying to prevent these pawns moving forward. But now the queen comes in and sits on this nice square. And you can see that the dark squares around white's king are very weak indeed. And in combination with those active rooks, this is a very unpleasant position for white to play. And Wesley is just taking the initiative now. You can see the rooks coming in, hassling white's pieces, and this is absolutely dreadful. I think in any format of chess, when one side gets the initiative, it's extremely dangerous. But in rapid play, it's really serious, because you simply don't have the time to fight against that initiative, to find some kind of quirk in play which changes the nature of the struggle. And here it's all black, basically. I mean, this move from Fabiano, he's trying to shake the position a little bit, but well, it's just not working. Obviously the idea is to somehow shake black out of his hold. Even this doesn't work. You can take this and take on c4, but Wesley keeps, I think very sensibly, keeps the pressure up, doesn't exchange, attacks here. So a check from the bishop, and now Fabiano had to fall back on the defense, and now simply rook takes c4. So excellent practical play by Wesley, keeping as many pieces on the board, keeping the initiative, tying white down, and white is now just lost, actually. And there was some nice technique. So these rooks looking great, wanting to take on g4, and you could take on a4, but no, Wesley continues the initiative on the king side. Excellent move, e4. Finally, that dark square bishop comes into play, and this spells the end, because every single one of black's pieces is on the attack. And now the final decisive move, h5. This is really great. Obviously, if that's taken, then rook h4 wins the queen, and now it just remains for that rook on b4 to switch round to the h file, and that is game over. I mean, that is an absolute tidal wave. Let's just finish things off. Fabiano resigned here. If queen takes, then we'll give a check. And that'll be the end of that. Yeah, as I said, just an unstoppable initiative. So that was round one. Round two, Wesley with white playing against Giri and Mamedyarov. And this was a very, very tough strategic battle with Wesley on the defensive for some time, but he turned it around, won a pawn. But with queen and pawn endgames, although Mamedyarov is a pawn down, he has this passed c pawn, which ought to give black enough counterplay to draw the game. But Wesley is, he sort of poked and probed away in this position, and finally he got his just reward. Here, black should play the king up to g7, and that stops white's threat, which we're about to see. Instead, Mamedyarov pushed on with the c pawn, and this was a blunder. Of course, you want to advance your passed pawn, but here, I'm afraid, he overlooked that h5 was incredibly powerful, threatening to take on g6, obviously, and if pawn takes, then g6 anyway. Queen d3 was played, but now just h6, g6, and here Mamedyarov resigned. Obviously that pawn can't be captured because of the pin. And if queen takes, this is a winning king and pawn endgame. If, let's say, pawn takes pawn, then the king comes across to take this pawn and wins. And if c3, then white's d-pawn rolls through. And unfortunately for black, this is checkmate straight away, like so. So, very good start for Wesley, 2 out of 2. He drew in round 3, and then in round 4 he faced Anish Giri. Now, the opening, Wesley with white, was an English, and they arrived at this very typical pawn structure, which is basically just a Sicilian reversed. And a few moves later, they had this position. You can see the familiar contours of the Sicilian pawn structure, with colours reversed, of course. So you have this clump of pawns on the king side for white. Here, white can take the initiative straight away. And this reminds me of something that Tal said. When the position is equal in the Sicilian, you know that black is better. In this case, with colours reversed, white is better. So it looks like nothing much is going on, but in fact, after this knight reaches c5, this is extremely uncomfortable for black. If the pawn advances, then this can be taken. b7 is on pre, so that forced the knight back to d8. Now, it looks as though black is holding everything for the moment. If black has time to play c6, for example, and then knight e6, he can play his way out of trouble. But this is the moment when you have to strike, and with the knight on the back rank, just disconnecting the rooks, then this is the moment to strike forward, of course. d4 is an excellent move, and if this is exchanged off, you can see that white is going to be able to use the d file very well. So understandably, Giri kept the position closed with e4, but d5 is an excellent move. Look how that pawn dominates black's knight on d8, and black still has problems to solve on the c file. In fact, things are really very good for white here. f5 is the natural move to support the e-pawn, but that allows a tactic. Actually, there wasn't much that black could do about this by this stage. If pawn takes knight, then d6. There's a pin on the c file. After the queen moves, d7 wins one of the rooks. So basically, at this moment, black is a pawn down. Now Giri kept fighting, but I really liked Wesley's technique here. I'm going to zip through fairly quickly, but just he didn't play knight takes because that would somehow give black a foothold. Even though white is 2 pawns up here, it's not that clear. You still have to work hard. Instead, Wesley again played very simply. I think excellent idea when you're in rapid chess. You want to play your moves quickly and easily. This way, he's only 1 pawn up. However, it's an easy position for white to play because all the major pieces are working well on these open files, and this diagonal is open. Basically, you're going to get the knight out very, very easily, like this. A check, and the knight will come out, and white is just a very safe, clear pawn up. Now, very soon, they reached an endgame, and Wesley's technique was absolutely superb. Black's problem here is that this pawn on the pawns on e4 and f5, they've advanced, and that means there's no pawn cover for the king, so that when white's rook sweeps up the board like this, then it makes life extremely difficult. Although you'd think, yes, the king is active, in fact, it's not attacking anything. In fact, the king's a liability. As I said, it doesn't really have cover. You compare with white's king, just waiting in the wings for the time being, completely secure. This is a beautiful position for white to play. Active rook, beautiful knight supported in the middle of the board. And, well, just see what happens. G5, Giri trying to find some counterplay. I think he probably felt if he doesn't do this, then the h-pawn will advance, and that can create problems later on. But let's see what happened. This is an excellent move because it now allows the rook to spin back, and you can see rook a5 with a deadly check. The king is in trouble, so that's why the knight had to move, but that allows, in a moment, Wesley repeated moves, just gaining time. The rook spins across, and you can see it takes advantage of this little chink in the armour of black's pawns here, and this group of pawns is now very weak, and that can be exploited. Again, there was a bit of shuffling here. It's no harm in waiting. There's no harm in just being very patient in these kind of positions. And now he broke with h4. So this will expose this pawn. Black has to take here, and now the pawns are split. Clear targets. And again, there was some shuffling. Just gaining some time, and now Wesley makes the break. He's still a pawn up. There's no need to rush with this one. That's nicely protected, but he's making as much progress on the king side as possible. This is really nice. Threatening g4. Another bit of shuffling. The king comes up. So this introduces ideas such as maybe a check and perhaps bringing the king forward. Also g4 comes into consideration. So yeah, the king is joining in the attack. Knight b5. You could trade here, but Wesley has an interesting idea in mind, and that is to bring the knight to f4 to go for another checkmate with rook e6. And now this is winning. g4, if pawn takes, then the rook checks and wins the knight. And here Giri resigned. There are huge problems for black in this position. Knight c6 check, forking king and rook. That's the threat. And if rook b7, then rook h5 is a winning move, because obviously if the rook comes here, then you can just trade down into a winning king and pawn endgame. So this wins another pawn, and that really is the end of the game. Really nice technique. I think these are the most unpleasant positions to defend when you have absolutely no counterplay. Great stuff from Wesley. Now, this is interesting. Grishuk with white against Wesley So. This position should be a draw. But, and I think in a normal classical game where players had time to think this through, then it would have ended like that. But it's not so simple in rapid. In this position, f4 holds ground and is going to draw the game. Even this is a little bit tricky because with black's king further up the board, it makes life difficult. Let's just watch what can possibly happen. And it's very subtle, this. And here, well, black is waiting for these tempi moves to run out, but finally it's time to make a break. White can lose this very easily. If you take on g5, actually white's king will be forced back and this king will head over here and eventually win. But here, after g5, there's one way to draw, and that's g4. If the king retreats, then that's just a draw. And after pawn takes pawn, you have to take on g5, and now king takes g3, and you can see that shuts out black's king, and that's just a draw. The white king just matches, and that's that. Obviously, this is not going to get anywhere. White has a tempi move, and the deadlock can't be broken. That's a draw. So f4 would have drawn the game, but king e3 loses. First of all, black makes sure that white uses up some moves here. This is the game continuation. And now the problem for white is that after king e3, king g4, and then h4, and this will win. If a5, then likewise we can come in with h4. In the game, g4 check played, but this is lost because black's king makes a break. Now, white also gets a queen, but with black's king right next to the pawns, then this is actually winning for black. So black gets the first check, that's important, and the king is in the perfect position. Again, Wesley took his time here. This is the secret. You know, when you've got some easy moves to make, let's just gain some time. So lots of checks first. In queen and pawn endgames, as we saw in the game against Mamedyarov, it's very important to centralize your queen. A centralized queen controls so many important squares, and Wesley knows that rule of thumb very well. So before he took the pawn, he makes sure that his queen is in the middle of the board, didn't rush it. And it really is lost now. Some more checks. No harm in doing this. Make sure he gets his queen to the best position possible. More checks. And this time he was able to take that one with check and manage to even trade the queens. There we are. So no messing at all. A nice clean finish. So that meant that was in round 5, and in round 6 Wesley drew with Leuven, who's also having a good tournament. That meant that after the first 2 days, Wesley So was in a clear lead with 10 points out of 12. They get 2 points for a win, 1 for a draw, and Leuven just behind. Fabiano is having a bit of a disaster. He's right at the bottom, but he wouldn't count himself as a rapid play specialist. Anyway, one more day of rapids to go, and then they have 2 days of blitz, and I'll be reporting back at some point in the tournament.